Um, I'm Verna Davis, and I'm a service manager within the NHS. I am a specialist in sickle cell and thalassemia. My career is basically I started off as a trained registered nurse. Then I went into midwifery, and I'm also a trained health visitor and a trained genetic counsellor in haemoglobinopathies. So that is my background. I was doing my midwifery training, and I was due to go for my Viva. And the tutor just said, make sure you know all there is to know about sickle cell, because apparently a previous cohort of students were asked questions on sickle cell and failed because they didn't know anything about it, basically. Unfortunately for me, there was a doctor who had worked in America specialising in sickle cell on the unit at the time. And he was great. He just gave me all the information, and that was really my first awareness of sickle cell. Needless to say, they didn't ask me a thing about sickle cell, but at least it actually increased my knowledge and awareness of the condition. And it's amazing because I was born in Jamaica, and all through my general training, I knew nothing about sickle cell. It was never raised at all. And then following that, a colleague of mine who was working in another city at the time was involved in a case whereby a young lady was, just through routine pregnancy, had to have an emergency cesarean section, and she died on the operating table. And it transpired that in fact it was because she wasn't screened for sickle cell and the right precautions wasn't taken. So that was quite hair-raising, to be fair. And then I think my next encounter was actually when I moved back to Manchester, and I was working as a health visitor. And my remit at the time was really health promotion. And as part of my preparation for a presentation that I was about to deliver, I visited the health promotion unit at the time, and met Carol Baxter, who worked in the unit. And she was having a conversation about sickle cell and within the community and the difficulties that they were having and so forth. And before I knew it, she'd roped me into joining the group, because I guess she was a bit taken back that I had any knowledge about sickle cell, because it was unusual in those days. And yeah, so I joined the group. It was the Community Health Group for Ethnic Minorities at the time. And then, just got involved in the campaign, really. I was amazed because prior to that, prior to my even getting to that stage, the Abyssindi group, which really should be given a lot of credit, because I think they were the trailblazers really for raising awareness of sickle cell in Manchester, people like Kath Locke. I also had the privilege of meeting Waveney Charles, who was a doctor, haematologist at the time from Trinidad, who again was trying to raise awareness about sickle cell in Manchester. And yeah, so these individuals, Lynn Stevens, Barbara Duncan, John, they need to be given credit for the work that they did, the campaigning that they did, because the plight of our patients then was absolutely horrendous, because there really was no service whatsoever. And so as I continued working as a health visitor, I started to get phone calls from people who were either not able to access service or just wanted information about the condition. And then we started a series of talks as well with the then Public Health Director, Dr. Povey. And as a result, I'm cutting a lot out really. There was a lot that went on, many meetings and campaigns and so forth. But the end result was that he was able to secure funding for a 2-year action research project to just look at what the issue was in Manchester around sickle cell and how best to ameliorate the problem. And it was at that stage that I actually applied for the post and was successful in securing that post. So initially I was appointed as just as a researcher, and it was a 2-year action research project. And at the end of the 2 years, they decided that no, this is a service that must be funded by the health service. So in fact, we were the first service to secure permanent funding through the NHS in the whole of the UK. Yeah, that was in 1983 that it was initially established. And we were actually based at Moss Side Health Centre at that time. And again, we were very fortunate because we had a steering group and their main function really was around fundraising as well as raising awareness of sickle cell. And we had some superb kind of individuals. A lot of them actually were from Granada. People like Lisa from Coronation Street, Charles Lauder. We had also, this is Louise Da-Cocodia. We had Clive Lloyd, Waveney Lloyd. We had a number of individuals on that group. And that helped to promulgate the information as well as raising funds, because at that time it was a research project, we weren't mainstream funded. So yeah, we achieved a lot. And you know, I remember even Mrs. Da-Cocodia, she would bring her daughter to the meetings and she'd just sit very quietly outside while we continued with the meetings. It was the dedication of that group was amazing. I think we all had the same vision and we all worked collectively together to improve the quality of care for patients or people within our community who suffered from sickle cell. The Community Health Group for Ethnic Minorities, whose name then later changed to Matcham, the members, we achieved quite a lot in terms of changing policy. There's a lot of things that's happening now which we just take for granted, but actually it was the campaigning of individuals within Matcham and the Community Health Group for Ethnic Minorities that brought this about. Things like the Chinese Health Centre, things like the ethnic foods that's now supplied by the hospitals, your Caribbean menu, your kosher menu. And so these were all instigated via Matcham and the Community Health Group for Ethnic Minorities. The translation service. We had also a dietitian that looked at the nutritional value of our foods, you know, in the different communities. So yeah, there was so much that was actually achieved in those days that really, looking back, I thought, wow. But at the time, we were just focused on improving the quality of care that people received within the hospital setting, within the healthcare sector, and holding them to account, basically. in terms of the setting up of the Sickle Cell Thalassemia Centre, it was a major achievement. It was actually the first service to be mainstream funded within the NHS in the UK. It was the first service to be developed outside London. And at the time, we were not only focusing on what was actually delivered here in Manchester, but with the help of the then Director of Public Health, we also assisted and facilitated other areas to set up a service, such as Leeds and Nottingham and Sheffield. And it was just an amazing time. And as I said, we had a lot of dedicated individuals. We used to work quite late at night. I think the focus, we all shared the same vision, and the focus was really around making sure we had a better quality of life for patients with sickle cell. And in actual fact, although initially the project was looking at sickle cell disease and improving the quality of care, we soon realized that thalassemia was also another inherited blood condition that affected our community, but also the Southeast Asian communities, and your Greeks, your Turks, Italians, Saudi Arabians. And so we decided to also provide a service for thalassemia too. Our community also suffer from thalassemia. You know, we always talk about sickle cell, and also you can get a combination of sickle cell and thalassemia, which is still the disease. And it manifests itself just like sickle cell disease. So I actually managed to, with the help of the Director of Public Health and the then Matcham, again campaigning, we managed to secure funding to appoint a thalassemia worker who spoke the different languages like Urdu, Punjabi and so forth, to help the communication within those communities. So yes, it was an amazing time. Lots of challenges. It wasn't an easy road, but it was well worth it. And to see some of the developments that have now come about, because over the years I've been involved in things like the writing of the National Sickle Cell Standards. We're actually in the process of rewriting the standards, which will be published probably next month. And what has actually led from those standards is that we now have a peer review. So every trust within the UK is now peer reviewed against those standards to make sure that there's equity of service right across the board, because before it was really piecemeal. And so again, they're held to account, and at the end of the peer review, if there are any major concerns, then you know that has to be the recommendation is given to the trust for them to urgently put things in place, and that's been a real eye-opener, and it's been great actually going back to those very same health authorities and seeing how they've improved since the last peer review, what other things they've put in place, what recommendations they've taken on board. And it's only good for our patients, because as I said, they themselves can use that report to say, this is the expectation, this is what you're supposed to be providing within your service. So they can use it as an ammunition to get the service that they deserve. There are lots of policies and standards that has now been put in place as a result of some of the work that's been undertaken. Collaborative work. For instance, there's like the shift study, which was done on behalf of the National Screening Programme, and that was looking at how we could accelerate the access of pregnant women in the first trimester, the first 3 months of pregnancy, because research has shown that if they're able to access healthcare at an earlier stage, then the outcomes is actually better, and you know they can avail themselves to more informed choices that's available. And that is now one of the KPIs. That's now one of the standards that's been rolled out across the country, that women have to be screened by 10 weeks of pregnancy. We also have now universal screening, so every baby is screened for sickle cell. Every pregnant woman is screened for sickle cell. And that is a major achievement, and it was absolutely essential that we had equity of service right across the board. And that has actually made that possible. Because, you know, years gone by, people would actually look at the individual and say, oh, well, they don't look black, so they don't need screening. And we have people who are blonde-haired, blue eyes, that's got sickle cell, so clearly they would not fit that category. So that wasn't really a good screening tool, just to look at, or even to just ask the ethnicity, because some people don't even know what generation, where their generation came from, where their parents or their grandparents or great-grandparents came from. So yes, implementing universal screening was a major achievement. And I think, you know, individuals, again, women like Alison Streetley, greatly enhanced some of these policies to be put in place. So I think everybody, there's so many different individuals that have really played their part in making this happen. And you've got to understand that in those early days, the plight of our patients was absolutely horrendous. I was actually told tales, horrific tales. There was one gentleman, for instance, who apparently had actually ripped out all the gas piping in his property and swallowed a bottle of bleach and blew himself out completely. Now you can imagine the sheer frustration that he must have been going through to undertake something as horrific as that. You know, and lots of misconceptions that was around as well. So really something had to be done. And I'm not saying that things are perfect now, but it's improved so much. It really has. It's just, and you know, in those days as well, we were focusing a lot on educating the health professionals, because, as I said, even I myself went through the system and didn't know anything about sickle cell disease. So we tried to implement it in the curriculum, in the nursing curriculum, in the medical curriculum. Certainly here in Manchester now, for instance, it's actually included in the medical curriculum, and they also have to have case studies and so on. So we've moved a long way, we've come a long way. I was actually involved in, with my colleagues Lorna Bennett and Marjorie Ferguson, in running a week residential course, the Pegasus training, again for individuals in the health field right across the UK. So again, these were all projects to kind of raise the awareness of sickle cell within the health professionals. Priapism is one of the complications that one gets with sickle cell in the male population. And again, there's a dearth of knowledge about that. And if it's not treated appropriately, it can lead to impotence, not to mention, you know, the horrendous pain and discomfort. So yes, really, I was part of the research project team looking at how we can treat this more effectively and how we can promulgate the information more. One of the things as well is that our patients were more reluctant to talk to females about this and to try and raise the question so that they didn't kind of suffer in silence, basically. We were very fortunate as well because the doctor at the time, who was also the chair of the project, also suffered from sickle cell disease. So it was great to have him on board to give us insight that you can't read in a textbook, basically. So that was great because again, that has helped to inform the treatment for this condition or this particular complication. Yeah. In terms of the collaborative work with Louise, basically Louise Da-Cocodia is just an amazing woman and very inspirational. Talk about determination. You know, at the moment there's a lot in the media about resilience. She was resilient. She was the epitome of resilience. Nothing really fazed her, and whatever challenge came her way, that didn't faze her. If she believed that it was a cause worth fighting, then yes, she doesn't give up until she actually achieved that. And I reflect back on the steering group and the amount of time and effort and dedication that was that she placed and gave, really. You know, these days they talk about voluntary work, but looking back on those days and the number of man hours that was put into these projects, and it was really, again, it was just that shared vision. It was just the focus on making sure that the quality of care for individuals was improved. And I think that was the driving force, really. And again, she stepped in when I was actually pregnant with my first child. That was a challenge, actually, because there was no funding, basically. I was informed that there was absolutely no funding to provide cover for me when I went on maternity leave. And but having obtained the funding, the other problem was, who was there that was qualified, that could just step in at the last minute to provide that service? And again, Louise Da-Cocodia made herself available, despite her very busy schedule, to provide cover. I've learned lots of lessons since then, and I have actually, in terms of succession planning, made sure that there is somebody trained, ready, available to take up the mantle if I'm not around. I am actually planning to retire, and yes, I have trained individuals there ready to take up the mantle and run with it. This project is bigger than me, and it has to go on. We have to make sure that we provide the best service for our community. And you've got to remember as well, I think in those days, there wasn't many senior black nurses like Louise Da-Cocodia. In fact, at the time, she was the only one that I knew of. They were possibly in London, but you know, the media, the social media isn't like what it is now, but certainly in the north of England, there just wasn't anybody like Louise Da-Cocodia. She really was the only one. I think there was only one other, Mrs. Byfield, Cherry Byfield. But yes, those are the only two black nurse managers that we knew of in Manchester. The other community projects that I was involved in, again, obviously, I came in contact with Louise. But yeah, she really was an inspiration, and it was lovely to have someone like Louise to just soundbite. You know, if there were things that you wanted to discuss, it was great to just be able to speak to Louise about it and pass things by her. But as I said, most of our time was spent on one campaign or the other, to be very fair with you. Yeah. Well, in terms of some of the more recent things that we're doing with sickle cell and thalassemia, to be fair, I think as well as raising awareness, as well as ensuring that the standards are promulgated across the UK, I've also tried to focus now on empowering the patient's self-management, because I feel that we can't just rely on the health professionals. I think we have to take ownership ourselves in managing our condition. So I've obtained funding to do things like the Staying Positive programme, which again is just empowering them to take ownership of their care for young people. We were one of the first cohorts to actually participate in the Expert Patients programme. And again, when I think of some of our patients that's gone through the programme and how that's impacted on them, it's really awesome. And then again, more recently, things that I've managed to work with a group from the university who have obtained funding to provide group coaching for our patients, individual coaching for our patients. And again, it's about improving their well-being. It's about improving their self-management of their condition. And the evaluation so far is really quite encouraging. So that is the kind of focus that I'm actually embarking on at the moment. And using some of our patients as mentors, because again, they're just so inspiring, and to motivate some of the younger ones to realise that, look, you know, you don't have to allow sickle cell or thalassemia to limit your ambitions, to limit who you are and what you can achieve. And yes, I mean, you know, for instance, we've had some of our patients who wanted to go into medicine, and you know, they were given so many negative feedback, and getting some of our doctors who've got sickle cell disease to mentor them has really helped, and they've just come on leaps and bounds. And it's amazing because we've even had individuals, for instance, who have been involved in the fundraising, and inadvertently they've learnt so much about sickle cell. There was one young lady, for instance, who was one of our local schools, and when she went to university, would you believe her roommate had sickle cell disease? And it was amazing because she said, you know, I was able to assist her, I was able to signpost her as to where she should go for help, where she should go. And so it's far-reaching. And one of the other projects that I'm involved in at the moment is with the National Blood Transfusion Unit, who really have launched this campaign to try and get more blood donors from our black community. It is absolutely vital. We need immediately at least 120,000 more donors from the black community. Our sickle cell patients and our thalassemia major patients in particular, they have to have blood transfusion every 4 to 6 weeks for life. Our sickle cell patients who are on long-term blood transfusion, perhaps following a stroke, it's not just about getting the right blood group. You know, they also have to have the right rhesus factor and so on. And they can build up these antigens if they don't get the right blood group. And so we've had incidents, for instance, I vividly recall this young lady, for instance, who her blood count had dropped down to 2.2. And they searched the whole of the UK and couldn't find any blood for her. And in the end, the local university, there was a plea to the local university, and so many of the university students and lecturers came and gave blood, and actually we did find the right match for her. But absolutely, but you know, some people, you know, are not so lucky, and so this campaign is really vital, and we really want to get the message out there to our black community how important it is to go and be a blood donor. There's lots of myths and misconceptions as well in our community about it. Some people are saying, oh, they don't use black blood, or and so forth, but it really is a myth. And the local transfusion unit also is launching a campaign locally too, to get the message out there. And we've actually formed a B positive choir. We actually featured on the recent MOBO Awards ceremony, and there's lots of other, there's some I can't mention at this moment in time, but there's lots of other avenues that we will be utilising. For instance, the NHS 70th anniversary coming up, we will be featuring on that. The Windrush programme, we will be featuring on that. And I think it's great, actually. I think it's quite innovative of the National Blood Transfusion to use music as a media to promulgate that information, particularly to our young generation, to all our generation, but particularly to our up-and-coming young generation, about the importance of being a blood donor. Because at the end of the day, actually, it's not even just about sickle cell and thalassemia. It could be somebody with renal problems. Again, you know, they have to be transfused quite a lot. And, you know, it could be your neighbour, it could be a member of your family. And anyhow, everybody should be our neighbour. So I want everybody to give blood, save a life.
Of course, no, it's a well-worthy cause. Okay, I'm just going to round up now. The work that you've done obviously is creating yourself and obviously other groups that have worked with you, other people that have worked with you and brought up the work that has now culminated in what you're doing today. So can I just ask about, finally, you know, it's a legacies. How would you see it? Because the work that you've done, the other development work, audit work, the reporting has led to in Africa, in Nigeria, for instance, doing other genetic testing. So your work has actually expanded outside of the UK. You've not talked about that. So just mention for us, please, just a little bit about that, because you've zoomed through it.
Yeah, I think we've been in a very privileged position, because the work that we do here in the UK is not in isolation. We've done collaborative work with other people in other parts of the world, like Nigeria, and that has actually been had a great impact, because they have a vast number of patients with sickle cell disease that far exceeds even what we have here in the UK. But also it also kind of emphasise that this is a worldwide issue, and we can learn from each other going forward. And the World Health Organization is also taken this on board seriously now and is helping to promulgate the work. We're also very fortunate to have individuals like Diane Abbott, who is chair of the All Parliamentary Group, to again help to establish and embed sickle cell within any policies that's going to be made, and to improve the quality of care for patients. And I think everybody can play their part. It's important that we all improve our knowledge. It doesn't matter that it doesn't affect a member of your family. And to be quite honest, initially when I got involved in this work, I wasn't aware that anybody in my family had sickle cell. I've later learned that they have, so it just goes to show. And I think we have to continue to take ownership of this. We have to continue to hold services to account, and to make sure that the right service is provided. At the end of the day, there isn't an infinite funding for the NHS. So we have to take ownership of our health. We have to do what we can do to keep ourselves healthy. A lot of the work that I've also been doing outside my NHS work is also around lifestyle programs, and emphasizing how lifestyle can impact on your health. There are, we call it the 8 laws of health, that really, if you comply with those 8 laws, it would drastically reduce a lot of the chronic health problems that our community is suffering from at the moment. And when I kind of even research some of the foods that our grandparents used to live on, and our ancestors, it was actually deemed as pauper's food, and yet that was the most nutritious and healthy food for us. And I think even looking at some of the plant remedies that they utilize, it's absolutely amazing. It's mind-blowing. And as it got far less kind of side effects than some of the drugs that we're actually embarking on at the moment. So yeah, one of the things, as I said, that is I'm feeling very passionate about is also people kind of raising the awareness about lifestyle and how that can impact on your health, and preventing some of these illnesses in the first place. And for our sickle cell and thalassemia patients, it's a big bonus, because as well as the complications that they can get from that, they can also suffer from other lifestyle chronic conditions, which is even more to deal with, basically. Yeah. Well, to be very honest, I think the project that you're undertaking is vital. I feel that it's a good resource as well that should be utilised, should be available and should be utilised. I think it will help to motivate some of our younger people that are coming up, and I think to have this kind of historical information is good. I was actually just relaying, for instance, to one of your colleagues earlier on, that when I was at school growing up, a lot of the achievements of our black community I wasn't aware of. It's in my latter years that I've become aware of this, and I was thinking, you know, how inspirational that would be. And I think it's important that our black community know about this, and also that, look, we're all going to face challenges, and we just have to know how to get over it, because you can get over it and you can achieve, you can get there. I've had challenges in my life. But as I said, you know, the Lord just seems to have put the right people in the right place at the right time to help me get through it. And you can get through it. It is possible. And I think some of the black activists in the past have paved the way for us to allow us to even be able to achieve what we're achieving now. And I think it's just for the next generation to take up the mantle and carry that forward and go a step further. Yes, I think it is possible. And we just all have to kind of work together in unity, and we will get there, we will achieve it. And they will achieve far more than any of us that's living now has achieved. And that's what I'd like to see happen.